Many project managers picture contract termination as a sudden, dramatic event where an active site grinds to a complete halt mid-operation. When patience runs out, the first instinct of a frustrated team is often to fire off a generic "we terminate" email. They pull the plug without identifying the specific contractual subclause they are actually relying on. That approach fails under FIDIC. FIDIC, the International Federation of Consulting Engineers, which publishes the standard forms for international construction contracts, operates on an absolute rule. There are no implied rights. If the strict conditions of the contract do not grant a termination right, you do not have it. Every valid FIDIC termination follows a 7-gate pipeline. It begins with a trigger, a formal notice, and a cure period window. Only after that closes can a formal termination notice trigger immediate post-termination duties, moving into the final stages of valuation and the dispute path. Gate 6 requires rigorous valuation of completed work, and Gate 7 dictates the formal dispute path. Resolving the net financial position between the employer and contractor is an inescapable requirement of the termination process. If a party acts outside this specific sequential architecture, they lack a valid right to terminate. Their exit becomes legally void, exposing them to massive financial liability. A common unforced error is mixing the grounds for exit. An employer might state they are terminating for contractor default, but also add a claim for termination by convenience to hedge their bets. This creates legal ambiguity that opposing counsel will exploit to prove the employer lacked a genuine default claim. The 1999 Yellow Book allowed for relatively open-ended language during this process. The 2017 edition replaces that flexibility with a heavily engineered procedural system. The 2017 update directly cross-connects every termination notice provision with Clause 20, which governs the formal claims procedure. This integration extends directly into Clause 21, the rules governing disputes. It forces every instruction, complaint, and waiting period to become a traceable, auditable breadcrumb on the project record. Under the 2017 rules, a termination notice serves as the opening exhibit for a highly structured post-contract dispute. The first path make with a machine is Clause 15, used when the employer pulls the plug due to chronic contractor default. Passing Gate 2 requires a subclause 15.1 notice to correct, a formal written warning demanding the remedy of a specific contractual breach. To be valid, this notice must function as a rigid checklist of failures and cited subclauses, rather than a vague complaint about slow progress. While the 1999 rules vaguely asked for a reasonable time to cure the defect, the 2017 rules enforce a strict two-step logic. The employer must issue a 15.2.1 notice, followed by a mandatory 14-day wait before actual termination. There are narrow exceptions to this wait. Extreme breaches, like contractor insolvency or proven corruption, allow the employer to bypass the 14-day termination. This diagram shows the financial endgame at Gate 6 using the Clause 15.4 evaluation. It begins with a positive contractor credit for the work physically executed up to the termination date. The employer then executes a netting off calculation. The employer deducts extra completion costs, like hiring a replacement contractor, and accumulated delay damages from that initial credit. The contractor often finishes the project owing the employer money. Skipping the rigid notice to correct sequence to rush to this financial netting phase will backfire. A tribunal will rule it a wrongful termination, flipping the liability and forcing the employer to pay damages. The second pathway is Clause 16, the contractor's nuclear option to terminate the contract when the employer commits chronic defaults. The traditional Gate 1 triggers include the employer failing to provide site access or failing to pay an IPC. An IPC, or Interim Payment Certificate, is a formal document certifying the amount due to the contractor for work done in a specific period. The 2017 update adds a critical new trigger. If an employer ignores a decision from the DAAB, an independent panel appointed to resolve project disagreements before arbitration, that failure now constitutes a material breach of contract. At Gate 2, the contractor uses subclause 16.1 suspension. By legally slowing or suspending work, the contractor creates a commercial pressure cooker, threatening project timelines to force employer compliance before full termination is necessary. This flow diagram shows the Gate 6 valuation if that suspension fails and the contractor terminates. The calculation attempts to pass through a barrier labeled Clause 1.15 Limitation of Liability, which normally blocks claims for indirect losses. The 2017 rules provide a massive protection here. Subclause 16.4 is explicitly carved out from this liability shield. The flow bypasses the barrier entirely, allowing the contractor to claim lost profit on all unexecuted works. Precise warning tone. Clause 16 exposes the employer to catastrophic loss of profit claims, ending the game of strategic non-payment that cannot be shielded by standard contract clauses. The third pathway is termination for employer's convenience under Clause 15.5. This occurs when external policy shifts or a total collapse of project funding force an end to the works. Employers often try to use this convenience clause as a disguised termination for default, hoping to sidestep a lengthy legal fight and simply hire a cheaper replacement contractor to finish the exact same scope of work. This diagram shows a major mechanism shift between editions. In the 1999 rules, termination could be quickly followed by retendering. The 2017 rules introduce a hard stop. Under 2017 constraints, the employer cannot execute or relet any part of the works until the original contractor has been fully paid the amounts determined under subclause 15.6. Furthermore, FIDIC 2017 explicitly protects the contractor's loss of profit in a convenience scenario. The employer's limitation of liability shield is completely removed for this specific clause. Misusing Clause 15.5 to quickly swap contractors creates a legally visible breach of the convenience rules. It halts the project and hands the original contractor immense legal leverage. The final pathway is the no-fault exit door for exceptional events, previously known in older editions as force majeure. This timeline diagram shows that an exceptional event does not automatically cut off the contract. The prevention of work must first cross a specific duration threshold of 84 continuous days. FIDIC also provides an alternative threshold, tracking the delay until it hits 140 aggregate days of prevention caused by the exact same notified event. Crossing these timelines grants either party the option to terminate. At Gate 6, the valuation for this pathway is a purely cost-based settlement, covering work properly executed, ordering the required materials, and full demobilization costs. Because neither party is at fault for a natural disaster or an outbreak of war, no loss of profit is awarded for unexecuted work. This process facilitates a fair, cost-only settlement when a project becomes physically impossible to complete. The ultimate reality of a FIDIC termination is that it almost always ends up in front of a DAAB panel or an arbitral tribunal. A DAAB panel does not simply evaluate the final termination letter. They will retroactively reconstruct the entire 7-gate lifecycle from the project records, verifying every trigger, notice, and cure period. If the tribunal finds that the sequencing was flawed or a notice period was skipped, they will declare a wrongful termination. The financial flow reverses entirely, and the party who initiated the termination becomes the defaulting party, liable for heavy damages. The 2017 Yellow Book's architecture forces project teams to treat valuation and evidentiary claims as an integral part of the termination process from day one. The FIDIC termination machine meticulously engineers the battlefield for the final legal war.